Welcome back to storytelling and reading. I hope everyone has had a wonderful week. I know that I have. My house, our house here in Larchmont, Virginia, Larchmont in Norfolk, Virginia, has become one of the official summer homes to the Fae. Yes, I did read one story at the beginning of the month about how there were fairies and the queen of the Fae living at the Weyanoke Bird Sanctuary in Norfolk. But it seems that they followed me back. Yes, they did. And they had an agenda. And today, children all over the place have come to meet the fairies, to leave them notes, write them letters. In fact, I almost didn't get into this room quickly enough to hit the little button on time because I had run downstairs to get my earbuds and I heard these little voices outside, and I peeked out the front door and there were two little girls dressed as fairies with wings. Oh my gosh. It is the most awesome thing in the world. So right now, outside my window, there are children at the fairy tree, and some of them have come in their jammies with wings to leave notes for the fairies. More on that after I read the story. So here's the plan, Stan. I am out of fables. Yep, read them all. You heard them all. Pretty much out of all of the news stories that I've written, the commentaries that I've written, that I think you guys would enjoy, because after that it's starting to get serious. And you know what? We got enough seriousness. What we need here is magic. Yes. So, starting tonight with this story, I'm writing a new book and you guys are along for the ride. It's inspired by the fairies who've taken up residence in the tree out front in the crepe myrtle, the corner of Longwood Drive and Woodbury in Larchmont, for anyone who's local or those making a pilgrimage to see the fairies. And so, on the weekends, I will be reading you installments to what will someday become a book. And this part of it is called A Leap of Fairy Faith. And that's the dog across the street. He's barking at the fairies. Now we know what drives him nuts every night. It's the Fae. Okay. The fairy queen, Lysandra, was out exploring the city of Norfolk, Virginia on a hot and windy summer morning. She was looking for a book. Fairies had taken to hiding their own books, which they enchanted to be invisible to the human eye, and then placing them inside of the wee free libraries that humans had placed all around the city. These little libraries were fashioned to look like small houses, and human folk placed books inside to share. This became especially important during the summer of the Great Sickness that forced all the big human libraries to close down in order to stop the plague from spreading. The sickness also kept the children away from schools and each other. Even the fairies had been affected by the pandemic. Even though the Fae can't catch human sickness, they are harmed by the sadness that had come over the world, particularly when children stopped playing, singing, and reading fairy tales. You see, the term fairy, it's a very broad term. In America and other lands, it applies to a whole host of magical folk. Now, this includes pixies, elves, banshees, brownies, goblins, and leprechauns. We have absolutely no leprechauns or goblins at this time, but, one never knows. However, some countries also include things like satyrs and nymphs and valkyries, gnomes, could be, sylphs, and even dwarves. Although, now, dwarves tend to very strongly reject being included, and they will often get extremely moody, so I would avoid that. The powers of the Fae specialize in healing. So, of course, they've chosen this time in human history to make their presence known to children and a few adults during the time when humankind needs healing of the physical and emotional nature. Fairies have the ability to cure broken and withered plants, wounds, broken bones, low vitality, even diseases, and restore the emotions and spirits of others. They also have the power of photokinesis, the ability to project and control light and nature. Fairies are the only species known to possess this power. This is where the term fairy lights comes from, and why humans buy those tiny lights and put them up around their homes. It's really in hopes of attracting the fairies. Now, Queen Lysandra had followed a human woman from the bird sanctuary where the fairies had made themselves at home to one of the wee free libraries that the woman kept in front of her home. This woman had taken many a walk in the sanctuary over the years, but recently Lysandra had heard her teaching a little girl the lore of the Fae. After the child left the sanctuary that day, the woman had astonished Lysandra by addressing her directly. So sorry to have disturbed your realm, your majesty, she said, but there's a terrible sickness in the human world, and my hope is that you'll come out and help. Lysandra, who was wearing a dragonfly glamour at the time, popped into her true form. Fairies, you see, have the ability to shapeshift and trick the eye in a way very similar to merfolk, who can shift from tails to legs, from solid to liquid and back again. Now, glamour, since they can control light, can make people see what fairies want them to see, or in some cases not see. It can also hide the true whereabouts of the fairy, so one could say it's a survival skill in addition to being magical. You are not entirely human, she said to the woman. If you were, you would have had the knowing, you wouldn't have the knowing of our ways in the seen in my form. Lysandra fluttered her fairy wings and made a few circles around the woman. She sniffed her hair and looked closely at her gray-green eyes. Mermaid, Lysandra concluded, in the woods. You must not be fully mer if you love the woods. The woman smiled. Half human, on my father's side. Oh, of course, thought Lysandra. It's always on the father's side. I've made a lovely place for you. Call it a summer home in a pink crepe myrtle tree within sight of the river, the woman explained. There's a flower garden with trolls standing guard, and there are many bees, moonflowers galore, with lunar moths that can be ridden nightly. The fairy queen was looking more and more interested. And there's a wee free library, the woman said, and tried to hide the smile of satisfaction when she heard Lysandra gasp. Fully stocked with medicinal texts that are fully invisible. The queen played it coy, saying, well, is there also fresh water and little towels and some cream occasionally? Oh, of course, the woman answered, thinking how she herself preferred her water lightly salted. Also, there are literally dozens of small children just waiting to serve you with gifts and songs and very powerful belief. See, without 100-acre wood and only a small bird sanctuary in which to dwell, some might think that Lysandra's kingdom was as wee as herself, but that would be quite wrong. For Queen Lysandra had taken dominion over the hearts of children, and therein lies the greatest of realms. But here and now are hard times indeed, and even the hearts of children had become so protected from the sadness and disappointment of the world that it took some doing to get them to open the door to magic. This year had been especially hard since the great sickness swept the whole of the world, shutting everyone indoors, away from nature and friends and teachers and family. It's a bargain then, said the queen. I shall follow you there, and if all is as you say, then it shall indeed become my second home. Now the woman allowed herself a smile. And you'll use your powers and your books to help our city survive this sickness?" she asked. "If so, then I'll seal the deal with cake, fresh milk, fresh water, and little towels." The queen agreed and followed the woman far across the field, along the human roadways, which were extremely noisy, and to the crepe myrtle tree, which was just as promised. The little door was shut tight against all but the fae, who didn't need a door at all, really. They only placed them there on the trees where trusted humans live as a way of attracting children and believers. Then the queen turned her attention to the promised library and couldn't help but sigh, for it was quite magnificent. Without hesitation, she flew straight through the wall as if it wasn't even there. Inside, it smelled of paper and ink, binding glue, and fine wood oil. Ooh, it also smelled sharply of fairy magic, since between each and every human book stood a teeny tiny magical text that only the fae could see. The queen popped back out of the library and, with a nod of approval, cast her fairy spell. "'Tis a fairy house true, and make no mistake. Find yourself a piece of cake. Lay half here, the rest at your door, and the world shall have worries no more. And please," she said, "make sure that you teach the children to leave us good and proper notes in that little letterbox that you have sitting beneath the tree," said the queen. "They must have their names on. That's only polite. And make sure they know that they can sit there and tell their troubles to the tree, because we'll be listening, of course, even though you can't see us." And so began the bond between the fae, the merfolk, and humankinds as they banded together to bring light and wellness back to the world. To be continued tomorrow night. I don't hear little children outside. It must be getting close to dinner and bedtime. But we have had a steady stream. 8 letters to the fae, and each of them has had an answer with the child's name on it, placed in a plastic bag against the elements. So, find us on the corner of Longwood and Woodbury. There's a little copper chair that children can sit in to write their notes and all the things that they'll need to write them, or you can bring your notes from home, or pictures if you're not old enough to write, or you're just being artsy. And so, I'm also looking for any lore or information or fabulous fairy names that anyone would like to add to my wealth of fairy knowledge, because there has been a tremendous amount of research going on in this house. As a matter of fact, one of the letters today asked some very important questions. The little girl wanted to know, will the tooth fairy be coming to my house if I lose my tooth? And will she bring me money? Very savvy child. And I got to see the letter as the fairies placed it in the box. And apparently the answer is that yes, the fairies are coming if you lose a tooth, but only if you're asleep. And they pay more if that tooth has been frequently brushed. Yep. And the children who were here in their fairy wings and their pajamas just now were singing to the tree earlier today. They sat there and they tried to sing the fairies out. I had to explain to them that the door is magically sealed and only fairies can open it, but that oftentimes fairies do use tricks of the light to turn themselves into either cats or birds. So I asked them if they heard birds singing outside their window, and they said they hadn't heard any today. And I said, well, if you leave a note for the fairies, it's very, very possible that you'll hear more birds singing, because it'll be fairies. And at that point, Pandora, the orange cat, made an appearance, strolled around and laid herself down right at the base of the tree, and pandemonium erupted from the fan fairy base, because it was probably a very fat orange fairy. Yes, so that's what's going on at my house this summer. And anyone who wants to know what they need to do to find the proper supplies to create their own very attractive fairy home, just either drop a line in the comments or direct message me. I'll speak with the fairies and get right back to you on how to find everything. I hear Amazon has a wonderful hookup on fairy doors. Good night. Have a magical evening. I'll see you tomorrow.